Welcome to the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Dame, holistic nutrition coach and speaker. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode here on the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. We are being joined today by a very special guest. Welcome to the show, Dr. Nicolette Richer. I did it. I nailed it.
All right.
Yes, welcome. We're so excited to have you here. And for those who don't know Nicolette, this is actually really fun for me because she lives not far from me and we're just starting to get to know each other and connect. And I knew that I wanted to have her on the podcast to have a really incredible conversation, and we'll see where things go. But for those who don't know who she is, Dr. Nicolette Richer is the CEO and founder of Richer Health Consulting Limited and Green Mustache Organic Cafes Incorporated. She's also a serial entrepreneur, author of Eat Real to Heal, PBWF endurance athlete, chronic disease reversal specialist, speaker, podcast host, lululemon ambassador, and most importantly, a mom of 3. As a savvy wellness expert, Nicolette is on a mission to educate and eradicate 22 million cases of chronic disease by 2030. And over the past 18 years, she's helped thousands of people reverse their diagnosed chronic diseases using metabolic nutrition, detoxification, and cellular regeneration. Nicolette has created a multitude of services and programs to help teach people how to eradicate their chronic diseases using food as medicine. And with 18 plus years as a chronic disease reversal specialist and many years researching the connection between the microbiome, obesity, type 2 diabetes, mental health, infertility, CF, cancer, autoimmune illness, and so much more, Nicolette is more than well equipped and ready to help you achieve optimal health. So how's that for an intro, Nicolette? You've done a lot. There is no doubt that you've been in this world for a long time and have really dedicated your life to some of these deeper healings. So I would love to invite you to start off with our audience. And I love getting this as sort of a jumping point for all of our guests, is to share a little bit more of your backstory. You know, what is it that really inspired you, perhaps in your own health journey, into this work that you're doing today?
Yeah, and there's many starting points I've realized because I've been asked that question, which is an important question, right? What's our origin story? And I used to think it was came from when I was 21. So this is like 25 plus years ago. And I lived in this amazing house on the North Shore in Vancouver, and 12 of us, we all lived together. It was a beautiful complex. It had 12 or 6 suites. We all had roommates. And so we slowly moved people out, moved people in until 12 friends were living there. And it was like a kibbutz, you know, or a commune or an eco-village, whatever you want to call it. We had a garden and we spent our 20s there growing up. And our family members would come and go to come visit, often to tell us to become serious and, you know, you need your own place and all of those things. And so I got to know one of my best friend's dads really well. And he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer when he was 72 years old. So when Bill showed up and told us that, like, we were all shocked, but none of us knew anything about cancer back then, and let alone that it could be reversed. And so he wasn't offered chemosurgery or radiation. He was given 3 months to live, and they told him to go home and essentially get his affairs in order. And Bill was not going to have any of that. Bill is somebody who advocates for his own health. So he changed his lifestyle to a plant-based whole food lifestyle. No refined products, you know, cut out all the refined sodium, salt, and sugar. And he reversed his cancer and lived 22 more years.
Yes. Wow.
And so that's, you know, one of my origin stories in this space. But really, I was born in Africa, and I was born in a very tiny town that has to this day no running water, no electricity. My whole family still lives there. And, you know, they rely, it's subsistence farming. And so you grow your food, you pick your food, you eat it within a few minutes of it being picked, whatever amount of time it takes to cook it. And so I came from that environment, and not very many people can say that in North America, that they came from a village in Africa, you know, mud huts, thatch roofs. And so for me, my mom, when she left that village, moved to the city, then we moved to Canada. she brought a lot of those principles back. So we always had a garden growing up. We didn't eat, refined processed food. If we went to McDonald's, it was like one time a year for your birthday, you got to go and get the little toy and all of that. But my mom made everything from scratch. And the only time she didn't was, I remember when the recession hit and interest rates, mortgages went up to 19%. And we had powdered milk or something, but most of the time we always went to the farm, got everything, and always had vegetables on every meal. And I also can say that only 3 out of 10 Canadians and North Americans get enough vegetables in the day, where I came from eating so many vegetables for, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, desserts. So that's my backstory. So I knew about this. So that, coupled with Bill changing his lifestyle, I mean, it was a no-brainer to me. I had to start researching this theory that cancer was reversible, and slowly learned that all diseases are fully reversible as well.
Yeah. Wow. So powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I know there's so much more to that story, and that's like so incredible to, like, I have goosebumps really thinking about this culture that you grew up in, where we are so deeply connected to where our food is coming from and how far we have gotten from that in our current world. And part of my origin story is actually traveling for a year in South America. And that was where my deep connection with food started, because they still, a lot of them, cook their own meals, believe it or not, right? It's not fast food, processed stuff. They go to the market, they buy food, or they grow it themselves. Like, there's this deep reverence and understanding of where food even comes from, right? Mm-hmm. And this like value in actually preparing food, which we have lost in our society, right? We just don't value it. People value doing too many things and not have enough time to cook, right? The excuse is, I don't have time to cook, right? Because we're prioritizing a billion other things that, have really swept over our world. So anyway, I just really resonate with that. And I would, so deeply hope that, we can get back to that one day, and even maybe just this conversation, planting those seeds for people to start a garden, or to start small, or, bring some of that in a way that, we can start to get back to that village mentality, and that,
my clients are doing that every single day, because if you want to reverse a chronic disease, it cannot be done with refined foods. It cannot be done with packaged processed foods. And it requires you eating the cleanest amount of food, the cleanest food possible, and volumes of, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, and fruits. And so when people do that, they realize, like, oh my goodness, you can't sustain that lifestyle that we've grown up in, which is a lifestyle of convenience, but it's a lifestyle of information overload. So people don't know, they can't tell the difference between what is healthy food and what is unhealthy food. But then when my clients do that, and they see their, rheumatoid arthritis and osteoarthritis and, diabetes, type 1 and 2, infertility completely disappear, migraines every day, those disappear, then all of a sudden they are planting gardens. They are going to the farmers markets. They are supporting local farmers. And so it's a natural transition in this current day age. So it's not like they have to go back and live in a mud hut in Africa. That's not what we're asking people to do, but and my clients find the way to do it in this current, busy lifestyle that we are leading. So it can be done.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. That is really inspiring, because I think a lot of people listening will go, well, that's just not possible for me. I live in a city, or, it's just not going to fit into my life. And I think we do need to find new ways, right? We're not all going to go forage and hunt and live off the land again, right? Like we have to find a way to make a new path of how we can actually eat real food. Yeah. Step one, by deciphering in the grocery store what is real food. And that's sometimes, I know we talk a lot about that on the podcast, right? We never had to do that before. You would go to the market and you knew it was all food. Yeah. And now it's like, you have to guess. You have to become this investigator in the, fighting against the big food industries that are tricking you with all their marketing. And it's tricky. So I love this, Kate. You've mentioned, and I firmly believe in this as well, from lots of different angles, especially around, the energy and deeper healing pieces, but around the nutritional pieces. You've mentioned a few times that we can heal from diseases, and you mentioned obviously cancer, but I think really specifically is fascinating. Would love to hear your thoughts about diabetes. And I know a lot of my listeners are either struggling with that themselves or have been touched by it, or have family members, struggling with diabetes. I know this is something that we're well versed in, especially in the world of sugar, right? And seeing how sugar overconsumption and processed food overconsumption can lead to these diseases. So yeah, what are you seeing in terms of like, is that even possible to reverse type 1 and type 2 diabetes? And maybe how do we do that? I mean, that's the golden question. Like, how do you reverse diabetes? There's the question, nail on the head.
Great question. So let's talk about type 1 diabetes. So if anybody's listening to the show right now and they have type 1 diabetes, go get a C-peptide test and see if you are producing any beta cells that are able to produce insulin. So that is the number one thing you need to. If you have one beta cell, you can fully regenerate your pancreas. It's been done in mice. It's been done in labs. We can do that. So that's the first thing. Super cheap test. Your doctor will run it. It's called a C-peptide test. So the second thing is we want to know what your A1C levels are, and hopefully you have a continuous blood monitor, blood glucose monitor, or you're pricking your finger every day. Regardless, you're going to be able to see it that your blood sugar levels will normalize as your beta cells start producing insulin and start regenerating and multiplying, and your pancreas regenerates. So you can reverse type 1 diabetes. Now, if you don't have any beta cells functioning, then that's a completely different story. But for a good majority of people, they still do. So that's the number one thing to know about for type 1 diabetics. Now, everything I'm going to talk about will apply to type 1 or type 2 diabetics. So there's a misconception that sugar causes diabetes. And I know we're on the, Beyond Sugar podcast here, but sugar does not cause diabetes. This is the number one thing we need to know. When your pancreas releases insulin into your bloodstream, your insulin needs to go across the cell walls, the arterial walls, get into your muscles, get into your heart, get into your kidneys, get in and get utilized by all the different organs, all the different cells, tissues in the body. But the insulin cannot travel with the blood glucose across the arterial walls if your arteries are caked in plaque. Okay. So what causes high production of, stiff arteries, arteries that have lots of plaque buildup? And if you think about it, animal products do that. Okay, this is through what's called a TMAO reaction. So when you eat red meat, when you eat chicken, when you eat fish, when you eat all of these foods that don't contain a stitch of fiber, what you're doing is you're feeding an unhealthy microbiome. Now, what I'm talking about now, I know it might be shocking people. You're like, what? But everyone told me sugar causes diabetes. And I'm going to explain what happens when you have arteries caked in plaque, what happens to your blood glucose levels in a sec. So when you eat a lot of animal products, and remember, we're living in a nation in North America, we're living in Canada, the US, Western countries, where people are eating meat multiple times a day, let alone multiple times a week. And only 3 out of 10 Canadians, 3 out of 10 North Americans are consuming enough vegetables. So that means they're not consuming enough fiber, and they're consuming high amounts of saturated fat. So when you consume these high animal proteins, high animal fats, this feeds what's called basically a meat-loving bacteria, meat-loving microbiome, which produces this TMAO reactions, which creates these cell foams or foam cells that essentially line your arteries, block your arteries. And so then your pancreas has to work really hard. You eat a potato, you eat a cookie, you eat sugar. It could be an apple, it could be an orange, it could be any kind of sugar, and we're going to debunk some sugar myths here. So then what happens is, the insulin and the sugar can't get out of the arteries. So then your pancreas says, well, you know what? There's no point in me releasing more insulin into the bloodstream because that's causing my insulin levels to spike. So then the pancreas slowly starts shutting down. But meanwhile, you're still eating all of these, refined carbs, processed foods, lots of sugar. So you already have the diabetes. The sugar didn't create the diabetes. The caked arteries created the diabetes. Okay, so that's the first thing you need to understand. So then when your blood sugar spikes, right, this is very dangerous for you. And then sometimes it drops because, again, you're not utilizing the insulin and the sugar in your tissues where you need them, which is outside the arteries. So then what do your doctors do? They tell you can't eat a potato, you can't eat, beautiful berries. Like a lot of diabetics are told not to eat berries, you're told not to eat apples, you're told not to eat any of these beautiful nutrient dense foods that actually keep you free of chronic disease. Okay. So then they're telling you that because they don't want your blood sugar levels to spike and drop and spike and drop, and they're trying to normalize them, but they're trying to normalize them by not giving them to you. The way you normalize your blood sugar levels is you allow the blood glucose, you allow the insulin to get into your tissues. How do you do that? You unclog your arteries. That's as simple as that. So that's why you can take somebody who's type 1 diabetic, and in 7 days, their blood sugar levels are normalized. And by the end of 1 month, they're taking no insulin. By the end of 3 months, their A1C levels are completely normal. Yeah. Now with the type 1 diabetic, it's a little bit harder because we're also regenerating the pancreas at the same time. So that can take about 3 months, but then we'll see A1C levels normalize. We'll see blood glucose levels that are all over the road, like up and down, highs and lows, will for like 97% of the day be within the normal range. So I have clients that are taking 80 to 90 units of insulin a day. This is type 1 diabetics that will do our program, and all of a sudden, with eating potatoes, apples, drinking vegetable juices that have apples in it, by consuming all of these beautiful high sugar foods, and nobody can see the video, I'm putting air quotes up there, and this is because everybody is basically saying sugar is such a bad thing, where your brain needs sugar. So if you're not getting enough sugar to your brain, you will end up with dementia and Alzheimer's, which they're saying by 2030, 1 in 1 people will have. And that's because they're not getting nutrients to their body. They're not getting the sugar that the brain needs. So the brain eventually slowly starts shrinking, and then you build up plaque in your brain as well. So it is not a sugar issue.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. There's a lot to unpack here. And I want to tread and this is really fascinating, because one of the things that I do want to do on this podcast is bring people here with different ways of seeing things, different knowledge, different ideas. This is definitely not an area that I have navigated. I know there's a lot of debate in like plant-based versus meat diet. I definitely, and the research and study that
I'm going to jump in here because I have to say this. There is zero debate within the biochemistry world. And if you think about biochemistry, they're the ones that are looking underneath a microscope. They're looking in petri dishes. They are looking at your cells. They are the ones that are able to, for example, if we do any kind of studies, we're able to see the effects. So for example, when people say debate, there's a lot of debate on Google, on nutritionist blogs. And we have a restaurant. We've hired over 500 nutritionists to work for us in the 10 years that we've had our restaurants. We've never met one single nutritionist ever. These are trained nutritionists that understand how to reverse diabetes. But if you go into the medical literature, right? If you go read any of the published studies, you will see that diabetes has never been a sugar disease.
Yeah, this is interesting, because you're absolutely saying, some really powerful things here. And I want to highlight that. And also, yes, there are alternative ways of seeing this. And, I just want to share that I believe slightly different things. And I have followed a lot of researchers in science who have seen things differently, right? And I think there's this understanding as well. I just want to point out that I'm always reminding people here within the podcast is to listen to your body and try on different modalities, different ways of eating, different ways of navigating. I mean, I don't believe there's one way of navigating out of disease. I think we're all such unique humans. And and I appreciate you sharing, your view and what you're coming at with this. I know a lot of people on my podcast, we do subscribe to eating meat. And that's what I want to say here. And also open to, investigating and learning from different experts, and really there is a lot of debate. I know you say there isn't, but there is in the science world and in the world of understanding people as full humans, not just cells in a petri dish. But But this is, yeah, no, I'm very intrigued. I'm very curious
Well,
as well
and I
to
do love
continue
that you brought
opening
that
that.
up. I love that you brought that up because whenever I do research, whenever I look at research, you have to triangulate research. So, how do you triangulate research? And I teach my clients how to do this because if they don't do this, they're going to try and address a problem through one avenue when it might not be the right avenue. But if you look at it and if you triangulate the information, so here's another thing that people need to understand. Looking at a petri dish is only one way. We have to actually be able to generalize this information into the public domain. So when we look at population studies, we see this over and over again. And this is why I say it's not really a debate. And the reason is because if you look at the populations around the world that eat the highest amount of meat, and now I'm not against eat, like if you want to eat meat, eat meat. There's actually a sustainable way that you can do that. But the thing is, meat doesn't contain an ounce of fiber. An egg
Correct.
does not contain fiber. Dairy does not, cheese does not contain fiber. Red meat does not contain fiber. Now, show me a human being on the planet or an animal on the planet that can live on zero fiber, right? Show me anyone, right? So, and it's going to be very difficult to do, okay? Even cougars, like that are meat eaters, they're still consuming some fiber in their diet, okay? So you need fiber as a human being. You absolutely do. So, and this is not a debate. Like this is something
Yeah, no,
that
I
there will
100%
never be
agree
a
with
time
that.
in history where
Mhm.
scientists will say, "Hey, everyone, we've decided you don't need fiber." That day will never come.
You also
So
don't need vitamin D, right? It'll be the same day.
right, exactly. We all need vitamin D. We all need vitamin C. We need B12. We need vitamin K. Like
Yeah,
it's all available, but we shouldn't have to take it always in a supplement form. That's another thing. We can get this
correct.
through our food. So I'm all, if somebody wants to eat meat, I'm like, eat meat, but be diabetes free, be chronic disease free, have zero heart disease. So
Yeah.
that's the problem though, is that if you look at the populations that eat the highest amount of meat, they have the highest amount of chronic disease. And these population studies, like if you look at populations, and these studies have been done for hundreds of years to look at which communities live the longest chronic disease free, right? Well, we do find they're the ones that get the most amount of fiber, the most amount of phytonutrients, the most amount basically of plant-based whole foods. And yes, some of them may be eating a little bit of meat, but it's definitely not in the volumes that we're seeing now. Now, when we look at the studies where people have been able to reverse their diabetes and they do eat high amounts of meat, what those studies show is they actually haven't reversed their diabetes, because if we go and give them a potato, what happens is all of a sudden their blood glucose spikes, right? So that's not actually reversing diabetes. The true meaning of reversing diabetes is you can eat any of the foods that you want in the planet and maintain your blood glucose readings without medication. This is what is so critical for people to understand. Otherwise, we're just perpetuating myths out there and people go, oh, I can eat this because studies show if I just eat meat, my blood glucose won't rise, right? So we have people that believe that, but your blood glucose isn't rising because you're not eating sugar.
Right. No, that's a good
So
point for sure.
that
And
is
that is
what
something
needs
that,
to be clarified.
yeah, no, I appreciate you explaining that. You mentioned that really well. And I want to echo that piece around fiber as well. That is something that's always, been a curiosity of mine. I have a lot of friends in like the carnivore community and keto community, and a lot of those, that's why I've never done carnivore. I'm very like, where's all my fiber? Where's the green things that I need? So, that was always something that was definitely a curiosity for me as well. Like, isn't this something that I need? And again, that invitation for everybody to listen to their own intuition and body, and to try on different hats, of course, of exploring what maybe will work for your body. But it sounds like, one thing we could definitely agree on too is I know when you're speaking about carbohydrates and you're talking about sugar, you're mentioning beautiful things like apples and potatoes, right? Whole real foods, where the truth of the matter is most human beings here in North America are not eating whole real foods. They're eating potato
Correct.
chips
Yeah.
and apple juice,
And
right?
French
That's
fries.
not even from an apple. I don't know. It's like
Yeah.
sugar with apple flavor in it, right? So most people are not eating that, right? There is this, like, as you said, we can't reverse any disease by eating toxic food, right? Or fake food, or
Exactly.
whatever we call it. So there is a massive difference there when we're talking about sugar. You're talking about an apple, a wonderful apple full of fiber and nutrients in the way that, God or the universe made it digestible for us, versus, eating the junk, right? And eating the processed foods that most people are tricked into thinking are healthy foods, right? Because of the
Yeah.
marketing on the front. So,
Or even a bag of, nut flavored kale chips, right? You know, that's super high in sodium, super high in refined oils, really high in processed ingredients as well, and very few packaged processed foods that are on the shelf, even if it was apple chips or kale chips or, you know, sesame crackers. And the advertisement says it's organic, it's plant-based, it's whole food, it's, or, you know, all of these labels that we give it. At the end of the day, most of these ingredients, if it has to have a label, is processed with processed ingredients that are highly toxic to our body when we're consuming them in such large amounts, like most people are consuming. So it really requires having the apple intact and, you know, not trying to take this reductionist mindset where it's like you can make a fruit roll up out of apples. For sure, you could do that, but that's not the same thing as eating the apple straight up off the tree or from the market or the grocery store.
Yes. Yeah. Very different, right? Yeah, very different. Okay. So thank you for that conversation. Obviously there's a lot there and yeah, a lot of different ways of seeing things and understanding things. And I really appreciate, you know, some of the nuggets that you shared there that I think are important. So what would you say? I think you've kind of touched on this a little bit, but would I love to go a little layer deeper, possible, into like what you've seen as maybe root causes. I'm obsessed with root causes here on the podcast, root cause of sugar addiction and our binging patterns with food. But what do you see as sort of these root causes outside of what you've already mentioned, you know, things like diabetes, insulin resistance, you know, a lot of, and other chronic diseases that I know a lot of my listeners and clients are struggling with based off of their lifetime of, you know, processed food. But beyond that, what else are you seeing as maybe some deeper root causes?
Yeah. So when an individual comes to me and they have a diagnosed chronic disease, because that's the only people I work with. When somebody says, I'm not feeling well, I'm like, I need a diagnosis. So let's get the diagnosis. I mean, I'll still work with them, obviously, if they're not feeling well, but most people are not going to go to the lengths of eating clean, real whole food and making their food from scratch until they've hit their rock bottom. And often their rock bottom.
And that is the sad part, right? Sorry to interject. That is such a sad part. And that is like, why I'm so grateful there's people like you and others in the world, hopefully educating on like not needing to get to that point. But it's fascinating as human beings. There's a part of us that needs for it to get that bad before we wake up and start paying attention, right? Or maybe being willing to make changes that are difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. Rock bottom is when somebody's saying, we're going to put you on medications and you're afraid of those meds when you are dying and you're afraid of dying, when you're afraid of an amputation, when you're afraid that you can't have a baby because you're getting older. And meanwhile, you've been infertile for 15 years. That's when people come to see me. And we've had so many women have babies in their 40s, late 40s, even though they've been told they're infertile, that their fallopian tubes are fully blocked. They can't transport the egg into the uterus. It takes 2 weeks to unblock fallopian tubes. Beautiful. It's amazing. So the body wants to heal and it will heal fast. So when people realize that, number one of the root causes is that they just don't have the knowledge. That's one of the root causes. They're so overwhelmed by the amount of nutritional misinformation that is out there that people are perpetuating day and night. And most of these people who are perpetuating it can't even read a journal article. Like if I gave them a journal article and said, explain if this is a bias study, if it was well designed, who funded it, and then how was the model, what's the methodology? Like nobody would be able to go through and be able to discern because we're not taught this in school, right? How to actually be discerning researchers. And a blog is not research. People need to know that. Some blogs, yes, and you'll get to know which ones are good the more, you start learning about this, but you have to be a discerning researcher. So that's one of the other root causes. Most people are not discerning. Most people take their information from a friend or a family member that says, I just read this book, you should read it. And then before you know it, everybody's doing the master cleanse or the candida cleanse, or some people are doing, a keto diet, for example. And, where there are no long-term studies that are done on keto, and the ones that are long enough, they've had to be cut short because they show that people suffer from neuropathy, clinical depression, depression, and a whole host of other conditions as a result of essentially being nutrient deficient, getting no fiber, all of this. So, and I said no fiber. We know that on keto, you can get some fiber. So just for all the keto people out there, just easy, okay? So, another one of the root causes is, so we've got knowledge. We've got nutritional misinformation. We also have self-worth. And so we have a lot of people that are burnt out right now, but a lot of people who don't put the oxygen mask on themselves at all. So we know these people, they're women. Okay. A lot of women out there. We have been raised to take care of others. And then the minute we get sick, so we have our babies, we're exhausted, we're burnt out. So many women suffer from postnatal depression. They suffer from Hashimoto's, after they have their first child, their thyroid is super taxed. And so we have those kind of root causes where people are not putting themselves first, especially women, taking care of others before they take care of themselves, because we've been raised to do that in this patriarchal society. So that's a huge, huge, huge piece. And then we also have lack of courage. So that is another root cause. And when, and I can talk about the fact that you're deficient in B12, you're deficient in B3, you're deficient in vitamin D, you're deficient, I can tell you all your nutritional deficiencies. These are the root causes of their chronic disease as well. And happy to go into that because, again, I only work with medical information and testing and lab results, that show that the person is deficient or that they're toxic in certain areas, and that's only because their organs now are not functioning and not able to process nutrients through their body, so they have elevated markers and low markers. But then so we have those root causes which have to be addressed, and once we address those, it's amazing. The chronic disease melts away, mental health improves, the brain fog is gone, the chronic pain is gone, and then what we see is that people start putting themselves first. So even though self-worth, being of service to others before yourself is being one of the root causes, lack of knowledge, all of that corrects itself, because when somebody's healed from their chronic disease, it's amazing how discerning they are as a researcher. It's amazing how they don't buy in to the nutritional misinformation the minute they're healed, because they're able to walk into a grocery store and look up and down the aisles and they know immediately what is real food and what's not, but it's because they healed themselves. So yeah, so we have it's a very complex question, and especially because this is what my PhD is based on. And then when you're talking to a person of color and you're talking to somebody with a disability, you're talking to somebody who's Indigenous, First Nations, Aboriginal. Well, then we also have intergenerational trauma and not to say if you're, a white male that you don't have intergenerational trauma, for sure. That applies to so many people, but then it's even elevated because of the intergenerational trauma and the systemic racism. And, this is one of the reasons why a lot of people have chronic illnesses as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned that part. We actually had a beautiful guest, Shin Foreman, on a couple months ago, really talking about that piece around, why even around the lens of sugar addiction, why it's so much more prevalent in communities of color. And, I think that's an important conversation. So I appreciate you bringing that in here, because that level of trauma that those communities have been through is just next level trauma, right? That is being handed down. And we all have that, of course. I'm really grateful you mentioned that, because that's a big part of, my passion and work as well, is understanding the trauma rooted patterns in why we eat what we eat, and also in disease development, and in unraveling, those emotional blocks and traumas, and actually being shown to now clear up disease, right? Even that part. And of course, the nutritional part that you're speaking to, and absolutely love the other root causes that you mentioned, the courage and the self-worth. And, these are, putting your own mask on first. I see this. I'm a huge fan of Gabor Mate, and he always talks about that, like this connection between cancer development and people pleasers, right? And ladies, that's us, right? Like burning the candle at both ends, thinking we need to do everything, trying to keep up with this patriarchal society, like you mentioned. And that's been a big unraveling in my healing journey with my body and myself, is like hitting the unsubscribe button to that lifestyle and continuing to attempt to practice that. I'm not perfect every week. Sometimes I get caught up in all the things to do, but wanting to slow down, right? So there's more time for cooking, because that's a priority for me. There's more time to be out in the garden. There's more time to be with friends and family and connection and these really healing things, that are important. So Yeah, no, I very much resonate and I find that really powerful what you share with those root causes, because a lot of people might not think of those
Yeah.
sort of energetic emotional pieces as being, well, isn't it just my deficiencies that cause disease or the crap that I'm putting in
Yes.
my body?
Yes, it is. That 100% creates
That too.
addiction. There's no doubt about that. And, that's the number one thing all our clients say. When they start our program a week or two in, they call me and they're like, this is weird. I don't have a sugar addiction. I don't have a salt addiction. I don't have a fat addiction, like, needing something oily or crispy. They're like, how is this possible? Like, they're not reaching for the bread and butter. They're not reaching for, the bag of processed food. And that's what happens when you restore your nutritional deficiencies and your body is no longer toxic and it's detoxifying well. There is no doubt about that. And then you make way better decisions for yourself. Like my clients that heal, they go out, they'll leave their partners that they were in unhealthy relationships with, but they just never had the energy to do it before. They go out and apply for the jobs of their dreams. They're able to go get a second job because they have so much energy. And so, but, getting rid of those addictions. And a lot of times people think they are a mental, emotional, spiritual addiction. They often tell themselves that too, or, and physical. They'll be like, well, my body needs salt. My body needs this. I'm like, your body just needs nutrients and it will grab anything and shove it. Like you would eat the dirt if that was all that was available to you. And your body is always searching for nutrients. So once it's nutrified and detoxifying, all of a sudden, all cravings go away. Cravings for alcohol, cravings for drugs, craving for porn, cravings for, you name it, because, and that's because you have a brain that also is developing neurons. And we know people that have addictions, people that suffer from depression, anxiety, they have fewer neurons in their brain as well. So which means that that they have less synaptic firing happening going, and that's another thing that creates a lot of anxiety and confusion in people. And then of course results in more stress on the body, the nervous system. And then of course they're trying to soothe. And so it's just a vicious cycle, but it can be stopped, and it can be stopped within a matter of weeks, days to weeks.
Yeah, that's a really powerful message for people, is understanding that this doesn't have to be possibly, a 3-year journey. This could be a 3-month journey, right? And it's amazing what the body, you mentioned earlier, I mean, I want to echo this, is that our body is designed to heal itself. Right? Like we just have to get out of the way, right? Like get out of the way and clear it. And I wanted to pick your brain on this too, because you've mentioned a few times the detoxification. So I'm curious about how you approach that. I know there's like a billion different systems and ways to detox. And I'm curious, like, what have you seen are maybe the most effective, like, pillars for detoxification? What do you recommend, people really focus on if they're wanting to possibly go through that process and clear out their body?
Yeah. And again, there's no question that's an easy question because, I'm working with individuals with a multitude of different chronic diseases, but just speaking to a general population, that your body, people often say, well, your body detoxifies every single day. You have a liver. I was like, well, you do have a liver, but your kidneys detoxify, your bladder is detoxifying, your lungs are a massive detoxification organ through your breath, you're detoxifying your skin. So we have all of these organs in our body. Your brain only happens at night, really. And it's a different mechanism. It's one of the only organs that doesn't really detoxify. You need to be in a good deep sleep to allow your brain to release a lot of this overload of unwanted chemicals. And so if you want to detoxify your body, you don't start with detoxification. Okay. So, and a lot of people would. They would naturally want to do a liver cleanse, a gallbladder cleanse, a blah, blah, blah. I can't stand cleanses. You are also impacting all your other organs when you focus on trying to just detox one organ system. You need to detoxify the whole body all at once and not start with detoxing. You start with nutrification. So when you nutrify your body and you give it whole foods that have loads of fiber, loads of nutrients, then your cells start to heal, and you have to heal your cells and the cell walls first. So if you don't do that, then you're never going to have that elimination of waste and the intake of nutrients, and you're never going to get rid of edema, which is one of the root causes of inflammation. Or they'll say inflammation causes edema, edema causes inflammation, but it's broken cell walls that cause both. And so we have to heal the tissues, the cells first. When you do that, your body will naturally start detoxifying. It's so beautiful. And every cell in your body will start to detoxify, every organ, every tissue. So this is the beautiful thing that happens. Now, for somebody who's been on a processed, refined food, lots of animal saturated fats, high protein, which is very toxic to the body. We've known this for 100 years. High amounts of protein creates inflammation in the body. It causes you to have higher estrogen levels. That causes more inflammation in the body. So it causes acidity. It causes so many different things. So when you have this, you've damaged your tissues for a long period of time. So as your body nutrifies, it'll naturally want to detoxify. And then you need to assist all those detox organs at the same time. So you're going to, some people might do saunas. Saunas are not strong enough for my clients. Some people might do like infrared saunas. They'll do running, sweating, cold dipping. Though these are all different ways to stimulate detoxification. They'll take milk thistle, lots of different herbs. You can do that as well. But then your supplement cupboard is just full of all of these things that you have to take every single day. So you're putting more in to try and detoxify. There's multiple different ways you detoxify. But with our clients, we do what's called a coffee enema. And I know for a lot of people, they're like, the coffee enema, there's no science behind it. And if you actually just use Google Scholar, you're going to find a lot of research on coffee enemas. And you'll see that they're done effectively in mice studies. They've been studied for people who are going through surgery. So we do that, but we have to do that because the minute my clients are nutrifying at the level that they are with switching to all plant-based whole food, it's the fastest way to reverse a chronic disease. I hate when somebody comes to me and they're like, I've been working with this practitioner for 18 months. I'm like, why are you still working with them? Your disease should have been finished like months and months and months ago. So it shouldn't take that long. So we just like to get results. That's what we do. And so we know that the coffee enema is a very effective way to do that. And it's to not clean out the colon. That's not that's not a high colonic. It is not an intestinal flush. It's to stimulate multiple different processes in the liver that help support the liver, which then the liver then works with the heart and the kidneys, the gallbladder, every other organ, your thyroid. It's communicating with every part of your body. And so by doing that, then we're able to sustain mass, quick detoxification on a daily basis. So that's the way my clients do it. But if people don't want to go that route, then yeah, they can do all of those other practices that I mentioned for sure. All time consuming. Some take a lot of money. They can do that too. So multiple different ways to detox the body. Exercise is great. Breath work is really great. I could go on.
Yeah, there's no one way, of course, as we're talking about, right? There's no one way. There's lots of options here. And yeah, I love that. I really appreciate that. Like that sentiment and idea that it's, we need to like pump our body full of nutrients first. And I would guess in that process, we also are at the same time removing the processed foods and the toxic non-foods, right? So we're detoxing in a way from pulling out the crap, loading our body with the nutrients, and then the body's going to start functioning in a way that ideally it's meant to, right? And clearing out the clutter. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? To not necessarily jump right into these like little one-off cleanses. And I know a lot of people also using that as, this is probably a side tangent for another day, right? As an excuse to just keep eating crap, right? Like, well, I do my liver cleanse every couple months and then I'm right back to McDonald's, right? And I'm right back into, eating the junk and not knowing where my food came from. So there's a lot of pieces to that conversation, but no doubt so beautiful when we can understand. And I appreciate so much what you're doing and helping people understand that their body is innately able to heal itself by getting the toxins out, right? Flushing it full of nutrients, allowing it to properly function, right? And that's the problem with most human bodies right now. We're just not properly functioning. We live in a world that's just crazier than ever. We're taking on more than ever, all the mental, emotional, spiritual pieces, and then obviously the nutritional and physical pieces that are just bogging us down. So much here.
We can take all of that on. So I love that you bring that up because there's so many people that want to detox their lives and get rid of the stress. And, we have a lot of post-COVIDers who receive those checks from the government and, they're like, well, I don't want to work. And I think that's beautiful if you can afford to not work very much, then do that. If you can simplify your life, then do that. But I want to know who's growing your food. Who's making your clothes? Who is building your cars? Like, so you can definitely not work and de-stress your life and to, keep life very simple, but who's also going to be educating you? So there's a whole body of people out there that have to work to sustain their lifestyle, and they want to work. And I love working. I
Yeah,
love
me
my
too.
job. I love helping people. I love saving lives. I love getting people off meds. I love getting people pregnant. Like, not very many people can say that, but I love knocking people up. It's the best thing ever, especially when they were told they'll never have babies. And so I love my job and I'm going to work till the day I die. Like, this whole retirement concept is one of the dumbest concepts that I've ever heard in my entire life. You retire and stop working. That's the fastest way to die. And so for me, I'm like, bring on the stress, but bring the stress on in a resilient body. So I had somebody reach out to me and said, "Oh, we have this, it's a beautiful website. It's, talks about women and all the horrific, things that they go through when they go through menopause." And she said, "Can you share your story of going through menopause?" And I'm like, I haven't gone through menopause. I still get a period every 28 days. I don't get cramps. I used to before I changed my lifestyle. Back in my early 20s, I used to get the worst cramps and get like the shakes and the hot flashes and like heavy periods and inconsistent and 2 periods a month. But the minute I changed to a plant strong diet, all of a sudden, every 28 days, I get my period, doesn't phase me. I'm like, oh, there you are. I actually enjoy getting it. Not very many people can say that. And so I said, I don't have a menopause story. And as well, I take women going through menopause and they don't have any of their symptoms anymore. And why? Because we hyper nutrify, hyper detoxify. And when you do that, you have a liver that balances out your estrogen levels and your testosterone, your progesterone, and all naturally. We get people off their hormone replacement therapy drugs. So she asked to interview me. I'm like, I have no story to tell you other than I love, like, bring on menopause, bring on aging, bring on everything, and bring on more work. Because when you are resilient, when your body is thriving, you can withstand all of these world stressors. You will actually be able to differentiate whose burden you need to carry. So we have so many people that are just sitting there, they're scrolling through TikTok, the internet, because they're sitting on the couch, they get home, they're exhausted, they can't cook themselves a meal, so they grab takeout, and they do this multiple times a week. They're so tired, and so they scroll the internet, and then they get weighed down by all the things that are happening in the world. And yes, we have a war in Gaza and Israel, but we also have wars in Africa right now. We also have political wars all over the world. We have, child sex trafficking going on. Like, if I were to tell you about the major life stressors in the world, we have animals going extinct. We have animals coming out of extinction. We have so much happening in the world. There's so much hope and there's so much despair. But guess what? When you're not suffering from brain fog, low energy, you don't take on those world stressors the same way. You actually become someone who could maybe start a nonprofit as a side gig, or create a side hustle where you're out there raising money for some of these organizations. You can go be of service. You can work in the soup kitchen. Why? Because you have loads of energy. And when you have loads of energy, the world doesn't seem as stressful.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful way to wrap things up here. I love that resiliency message and understanding like stress isn't going anywhere, but how we see it and how we, can support our bodies in managing it, right? And being resilient through it is so needed, right? I think so many people are mistaken. Like, I just want to make all the stress in my life to go away. You're going to get stress. It's going to happen. Even if you're not working and just laying on a beach all the time, you're going to be stressed about the sand in your eyes or something. There'll be something to
Family
stress you out,
member
right?
is gonna die. Like, you might get
Totally.
fired from your job
Yeah.
that you're maybe only working at a quarter time.
Yeah.
We might get hit by COVID again. There's a million and one things in our life that, they happen every single day. And so it's way more important to have a resilient body and mind, one that and it doesn't mean hiding from the stress. It actually means being able to face it full on, but not having it impact you in a negative way. It's your perception will be actually, you'll find the beauty in the stress. You'll see stress as a blessing. You'll see it as an opportunity for growth. You can read books on stoicism that you wouldn't be able to read before because you had so much brain fog. Like, the world is just so different when we when we are hyper nutrified and hyper
Yeah.
detoxified.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, everything changes for sure. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on and being willing to kind of go back and forth a bit there. And I really appreciate everything that you're doing in the world and everything that you're sharing with my audience here. I hope that they get a lot of nuggets out of this as well. And where can people find more about you? Would love to invite you. Obviously, I'll have some links of yours in the show notes, but feel free to share here where people can connect with you and come learn more about all the amazing work that you're doing.
Yeah, so they can go to my website at nicolettericher.com. We have a podcast as well, Eat Real to Heal podcast. We've had lots of beautiful guests on this show, and that would be another place where people can learn more information. I think we have if anybody's suffering from a debilitating illness, they can get a free health consult. We'll give you the link for that so that they can just start to understand, is food the way to go or not? We are very discerning in the clients that we take on, and helping them understand the research around their illness so that they're able to go back to their doctors and present the information to them, and then actually start building out a team that can support them in their chronic disease reversal and treatment of their disease. So we support clients that way, and just to make sure that they're really getting access to the good information that's going to get them the results that they want. And if you don't know what results you want, I know a lot of clients don't know what they want. It's, they come to me and I'm like, what do you want? And I don't know, but that, we have to work through that. And most people realize they want to live a really long life, free of chronic disease, so they can play with their grandkids, so they can travel the world with their partners. And, it's good to, when you're working with anybody, lead with that, especially a healthcare practitioner, because if that doctor knows that's what you want, then that doctor is actually going to do everything to try to not put you on your medications, and to support you in being in contact with the people that can help get you off medication. So
hopefully, that's beautiful.
Yeah, those are all the ways you can get in contact with me. And of course, if you're in British Columbia, come to our restaurant. We have an amazing restaurant, the Green Moustache. So
where is it, Nicolette? I need to come. Where's your restaurants?
Yeah, we have 2 in Whistler, one in the Village and one in Function Junction. Yeah, we've had them for 10 years. And
amazing.
Yeah, they're beautiful. They're super yummy food.
So great. Well, next time I'm in Whistler, I don't go there often, but it's so beautiful. I need to make the trip up there more. So maybe in the summer. When it's not
we'll go for lunch and talk all things sugar and all things health and wellness.
Yeah, definitely. That would be incredible. And thank you so much again for coming on the show. And everyone, if you want to connect more with Nicolette and resonated with what she's sharing, I'll make sure the links are below in the show notes. And thank you so much for tuning into another episode. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you for tuning into another episode. If you're loving what we talked about today, please remember to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone you love. And if you're ready to dive deeper into discovering your root causes and patterns that are keeping you hooked on sugar, be sure to check out our brand new free workshop series that will help you kick emotional eating for good. Find the link to download this free series and other amazing resources in the show notes below.